I'm going to show you how producers like Q Project utilize loops to build the core foundation for their song, like the 1996 classic, The Instrumental. Like hip-hop and house in the 90s, sampling and looping also played a massive part in jungle and drum and bass production. Many bedroom producers could only afford a basic setup, with the sampler being the most crucial piece. This meant finding great sounds involved sampling and looping other songs. Producers like Q Project and even Shogun, the earlier alias for Artemis, heavily used sampled loops in their earlier ambient jungle works. Now, if you go on a website like Who Sampled, or even check out some of these videos up on the screen, you're gonna realize how much of early ambient jungle was sample looped bass. Let's walk through how you can create a track built around a core sample like they did back in the 90s. Now, for making a song like this, I find it's easiest to start with that core sample or loop and then build everything in the track around that, because this is going to set that vibe for the song. And once we loop it up and pitch it around and sequence it, we can then begin to fill in the blanks. So I'm going to use the same sample that Q Project used in the instrumental, which is that sample you heard at the beginning of the video by Lonnie Liston Smith, the song Between Here and There. And so I sampled that song or that piece in the intro and threw it into the Bitwig sampler down here, and I looped up this part at the beginning. And what I did on this loop is a few things. One is I put a little bit of release, and that's going to help this fade back and create a smooth transition. So once I throw it in the sequencer and the note re-triggers, it'll make a smooth transition with no pops or crackles. And that's also because I'm using the ping pong loop. So it's just very smooth, good bit of release, and I have two voices of polyphony enabled on the sampler so that things don't just cut out. And so what I did is then came into my timeline and I looped this up in 4 bars here. So this is what it sounds like. And so you can see how when it re-triggers, we have 2 voices, we have some release, it ping-pongs back and just creates a smooth transition. Now, what I did with the MIDI note as well is I pitched it down 1 octave, or from C3 to a B2, so it gets pitched down. And I also pitched it down -1 semitone in the sampler, so it slightly alters the tone of the sample, and then it helps it fit within that 158 BPM I'm running, which is pretty slow for an ambient jungle tune. I also did a high pass filter on here just to get rid of a lot of the low end in this and leave room for other elements that I'm going to add on top later. And so once I have this sample, I can build everything around this, start slotting in the drums, the bass, and other notes on top. Now, what I wanted to do from here is start jamming out over top of that sample. We kind of have that core vibe, and so now I can start to bring in sounds from different synths and jam them out over top to create something truly original. And the first thing I have here is this little motion note that I sampled from a Korg Triton, threw into a sampler, pitched it down -12 semitones, gave it some attack to fade in nice, some release to fade out nicely. It sounds like this. We could stack that with a sampler, or the sample. And so we're taking that core sampled idea and we're just building on top of it, right? We're adding the atmospherics in there and trying to transform this into something unique. Now, this specific sound, again, it came from the Korg Triton. Now I'm going to open the Korg Triton here. It is a combination in a preset pack that I will be releasing in the near future here, full of really crazy atmospheric ambient pads, textures, and soundscapes. This one is called Zero G. Sounds like this. And we just sampled a single note, but it'd be great. And that's what we have for our first sound there. Next thing I have is another bit of a single note patch playing within here from the Korg Triton. And this is using the NASA Station combination that also is coming from my upcoming preset pack. Sounds like this. We just played a single note progression in here, again, jammed out over top. It can be difficult to know what key you're in. And let's be honest, a lot of these guys back in the day, they weren't formally trained musicians. So don't worry too much about, oh, is everything in key? Just do your best to use your ears, jam out on top. And so if we stack all these sounds together, this is what we have so far. Now, a little bit later in the song, I start to bring in some more sounds. This next one is kind of a little transition thing. This is coming from the Korg Triton. This is the Deep Ambience patch, which also is coming from my upcoming preset pack for the Korg Triton. Just a nice transition element, right? So we have our core loop there. Hey, we're transitioning into a new part of the song. Kind of gives us some ambience to flip through and not just sound like, you know, a reverse cymbal. And then in the second part of this song, I started to bring in a few more sounds. One is this sound from the Korg Triton. This is the Crystal Caverns 2 patch, which actually comes from my Intelligent Jungle Pads preset pack that is out now. Really nice pad. This is also just playing single notes in the progression that you see on the screen. So if we stack this up. And the final sound we have down here is another Korg Triton. This is the Nighttines EP, which I believe comes stock in the Triton. And we're just playing like a little melody down here in the second portion. Bring that velocity up now that I'm looking at it. So again, just jamming out on top. We throw everything together. kind of all the core sound. So again, it's this process of finding that core loop, jamming out on top to really emphasize and build on that feeling that the core sample provides. Now, I do want to look down here at the bottom. I have a bunch of different sound effects littered throughout the song. This comes from a old 90s sample pack, and I basically just chopped up all these different sounds, high-passed it to not muddy up things too much, added a delay, big reverb, and we just sprinkle this in all throughout. Right, and again, these sounds are just sprinkled throughout. Some are chopped up, cross-faded in, looped up, reversed. Just finding good spots to drop them in. This is Ambient Jungle after all, so that ambience is super important. All right, let's look at drums next. So we have a chopped up Soul Pride break. The break came from the Jungle Warfare sample CD. It sounds like this off the CD. And then once we stretched it to 158 BPM, chopped it up and resequenced it, sounds a little bit like this. And so what we did in terms of processing is just a little bit of a smiley EQ here to carve out some of the mid-range to leave room for a lot of these synth elements to shine in there. We are clipping this break as well, just chopping off those peaks so we can handle our volume better overall in the track. And then if I go into some of these patterns here, right, just basic jungle sequencing here. One thing I do tend to do with my break chops is turn off the release or turn it as low as I can in Bitwig on each hit. And that then allows me to do these little like stutter step things because the sound or the chop will only trigger for however long that MIDI note is on the timeline for. So it gives you very tight control to do these tight little chops like you see here. Then you'll also see I copied this snare from the beginning here and just enabled reverse playback, which will play that snare in the reverse. And then in some of our patterns where a normal snare would be, we just play that reverse snare. Kind of keeps things a little interesting, you know, another kind of old school technique to use. Now, alongside all this, we have the classic little shaker shots from a JV 1080 going through a big delay here, and we're just letting those ring out at various parts in the song. Nice little wood block there too, and we just alternate between the two, so it's kind of stacked up with the break. Helps create ambience too. Then a couple reverse cymbals here, nothing special. Big high pass on there. That's something I like to do. I like a very thin reverse cymbal that's just wispy, goes through a big delay, goes through a big reverb, contributes to the ambience. Last thing here is our bass. So we have a 808 sample, kick sample thrown into a Bitwig sampler, which is classic jungle technique. Then we have some basic processing on here. I pitched it up 5 semitones here, have it set in mono, a little bit of release, and then we EQ a little bit of the top end here, and you get your little jungle bass. And the reason why it has that fuzzy sound is I do have a Tal DAC on the master, so if I turn that off, this is a good transition into the master. I did throw a TAL DAC VST on the master using this AM6070 drive preset. This emulates old sampler DACs, so it kind of gives you a little bit of crustiness. You just throw it on the master and it can just degrade the overall sound of the song. If that's something you're interested in to get that real old school sound, you can use something like this. And then I used fresh air here on top just to brighten things up after we kind of degraded things through TAL DAC. Fresh air is a great VST, and it's very similar to a lot of those sonic enhancer hardware outboard units that folks would use back in the 90s, like the Ultra Effects. So great way to just add some sparkle and sheen to things. And that is it, folks. That's how we threw this one together. I hope you found this useful. If you want a copy of this project file, check me out on Patreon down below, where you can get not only this song as a Bitwig Project Studio file, but other songs in my previous videos and many more going forward. Appreciate the support, guys. Have a great new year.